The meeting will begin in 1 minute. The meeting will begin in 1 minute. Thank you.
Welcome, and I call this meeting to order, and welcome to the Tuesday, October 17th informational meeting. It is an absolutely beautiful fall day out there. Our first order or item on the agenda is a report from Councilor Rolfing on the Audit Committee meeting that took place last week on Thursday. Councilor Rolfing.
Yes, thank you. We had a good meeting last Thursday. First thing we did was recognize Seth Peterson for his years of service on the Audit Committee, gave him a plaque and thanked him very much for his service there. We also introduced Rose Grant, who is the newest member taking over his position, and she's going to be an excellent addition to our committee. We then looked at was presented the audit from the cable TV and OVS. I'm still not exactly sure what that stands for, audit, but it has to do with the cable service here in Sioux Falls. And there was a slight rounding error that Midco left didn't do correctly. That was found over the last 3 years, and there's like a $12,000 check that's coming at the end of the year for that. But other than that, everything is fine. It was an honest mistake kind of thing. Then they did an accounts payable audit, found that there were some things that are happening in finance department that are, they just got way too many accounts. Sometimes they don't clean them up maybe as good as they can, or somebody comes in and establishes an account as ABC, utility, and the next one time they do it, it's Anderson, Buckholz, and Crenshaw utility, and they're the same company, and so they just got to work on some of those things. Nothing serious, but everything seemed to be in order there. We are working on a policy and procedures audit, which is a big one, and that hopefully will be done by the end of the year. And that's where policies and procedures for each one of the department are going to be looked at together to make sure there aren't anything that crisscrosses or doesn't match and or is not according to the official policy. 2 travel continuing education requests, one for Kim Schroeder and Ashley Vandenberg here in Sioux Falls for a day of CE credits. And the other one was for Kim Schroeder to do the Mid-American Intergovernmental Audit Forum in Kansas City later in the year. And so we okayed those. We do have that in the budget because it's so important for those people to keep up on their skills and learn from other people in the area. So that would be my report.
Thank you very much, Councilor Rolfing. Any questions of the Councilor? Okay, our next item is a report from Public Services, and Christine Erickson will give that report.
Thank you. We just had one item on Public Services. It was Charter 101 presented by City Attorney David Feifley. He gave us some background history on our charter and explained kind of how we got to this type of government that we have, and just gave us some overview. We then went into the charter revision, how to make amendments to the charter, what it looks like. Can the council do that? Can citizens do that? It was a high level but very informative, and I'm thankful for his presentation. It was good discussion amongst ourselves, and we had no takeaway items from there. It was just simply informational. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for the Councilor? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to our next item, which is City Council open discussion. Any items? Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. Since I'm on a roll, I guess. I just wanted to just have a brief conversation and with the council. I'm sure you saw the announcement as well as the media in regards to the first transportation network company getting a sales tax license in South Dakota. This is Lyft, and something that's been going on for a significant amount of time and took a lot of work through the previous council as well as the state legislature. Councilor Dean Karski was the leader on that ordinance along with myself, and we passed that back in November of 2015, so we're almost 2 years to the date, very close to 2 years to the date of passing that ordinance, to really be proactive in allowing this type of business and this type of technology to flourish and operate in our state. This is one simple step of many steps to get to the finish line. The conversations will continue, and it's been really fun, and it's really it really came from a private citizen emailing me saying, "Hey, why don't we have this service in Sioux Falls? This is crazy. We should have this." And so we exchanged several emails, decided to talk, and decided to take on this task together. And like I said, it's been a pleasure to work with Citizen Greg LaFollette through this process, as well as making contacts through the Lyft Corporation and working with the Department of Revenue. And so, like I said, this is just one simple step in the process, but one that we've never got to at this point yet. So we're super excited. It's still ongoing and still will continue to be ongoing as we continue to talk. So just wanted to give that update, as there was a pretty quick press conference that took place yesterday, and as you know, the citizens have been hot on this and really wanting this service. And so when the sales tax license was released, we knew we needed to communicate this with the public and communicate this with the good people of Sioux Falls as well as the state, because I've already taken calls from other folks around the state of South Dakota, including the mayor of Rapid City and their city council president, asking for our assistance here in Sioux Falls to take a look at their TNC ordinance and how we can assist them, and that's what it's about. It's been fun.
Thank you, Councilor Erickson, and we all did receive that email from Mr. LaFollette, and I thank you for following up and assisting a citizen with one of his concerns. Any other, Councilor Neitzer?
Yeah, I do have a couple of items. The first is, last week, Councilor Erickson and I sat down with Karen Leonard and Diane Best in the city attorney's office. We really wanted to kind of dig into this contingency fund issue, and we had a very good discussion. We were able to do a deep dive into that, into construction manager at risk, and also the design bid build, because we had really the two experts in the room, one that does design bid build and one that's a construction manager at risk expert. So it was good to kind of compare and contrast and clarify some of the things of what does a contingency fund really mean, how can it be used, and it did answer a lot of questions. And I would say, even if I maybe disagree philosophically in the end about maybe the value or whatever of the contingency fund and all of that, it did answer a lot of questions and addressed a lot of concerns. So it was incredibly helpful, and if you have any question about it, I would say to reach out to them, and I'm sure they'd be happy to sit down with you. The other one is, last Friday I spent 8 hours at Metro 911. It was really an incredible thing to see. I was really impressed how calm under pressure they are. As I said last week in the directors meeting, you've got really a group of heroes over there, and they really probably don't get enough accolades because they're just kind of behind the scenes, just kind of there for us 24/7, but they're not kind of out there. So hopefully if we can, anytime we can give them credit or say thank you, we should do that. It's really interesting to see how they're the air traffic control essentially for the ambulance service and for all of our other emergency services, police and fire. And most importantly for me, with this whole thing about the ambulance over the last several months, all of the things that we've kind of been learning about, sometimes you just have to visually see it. And once you see it, it clicks and you see that, okay, this is how that works, this is how that works. It answered a lot of questions, and they were very excited to have me, and they would be thrilled if anybody else that hasn't done it wanted to do it, just reach out to them, and they'll welcome you with open arms. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other? Councilor Staley.
Oh, I've got a few things. First of all, last Friday night, Councilor Starr and myself had a unique opportunity to tour some apartment complexes. And I have to say that I had my eyes opened in a way that I never imagined. We saw apartments that had pitch black parking lots, crime-free housing, that the sidewalks in the front, total blackness, darkness. We saw exposed wiring. We saw doors that were no glass in the front door, open. Apparently homeless people living in the hallways in that apartment, smoke detectors not working, filth, disrepair. It was very concerning. And since then, I did put something on Facebook about it, and I've gotten calls from landlords and the Multi-Housing Association wanting to meet and talk about this. So what I wanted to say to this group of elected officials is if any of you have any experience with dealing with this, or if you can give me some background as we move forward, I'm very, very appreciative of that. Thank you to Councilor Starr, who took the time to go out and do this. And I would encourage any of you, if you haven't had that opportunity, to step into that. It really, you have to see it to believe it. No one in our community should have to live that way. No one. The second thing I wanted to talk about, Jim David, if you come forward, please, is 2 weeks ago we had the convention of the South Dakota Municipal League here, and it was I was really excited to attend one of the presenters done by a David Hancock's, and it was entitled "How to Steal $53 Million from a Small City." And this man is an auditor. He's been recognized by the Association of Governmental Auditors, and he was talking about Dixon, Illinois, and how this woman, an employee, was able to embezzle huge amounts of money. And I, of course, have been very concerned as an elected official with the oversight that we are giving to protect our citizens and make sure that everything is being done as it should be. So there were a few things. How many council members here were able to attend that? Okay, great. And put on, of course, by our own municipal league. So I've just put, let's go to number 2, Jim. Something that he was talking about the checks and balances we have to make sure that we don't ever have an opportunity for any fraud to happen. And I thought this was interesting. Familiarity threat. Members having a close or long-standing relationship with an attest client, or knowing individuals or entities, including by reputation, who perform non-attest services for the client. A member of the attest engagement team whose spouse is in a key position at the client, such as the client's CEO. A partner or partner equivalent of the firm who has provided the client with the attest services for a prolonged period. A member who performs insufficient audit procedures when reviewing the results of a non-attest service because the service was performed by the member's firm. A member of the firm having recently been a director or an officer of the client. Or a member of the attest engagement team whose close friend is in a key position of the client. So again, talking about having relationships, friendships, sometimes those things develop not even intentionally, but just because of where we live. And then it had another slide, not being a professionally skeptic. Too often people accept at face value what is told to them. And I will say that I have a tendency as a council member to question what I'm told. I think that we are called to check things out. We don't just accept what the experts say. And challenging management is not in keeping with good relationship management. It's not what your mother taught you. So we're not really encouraged to challenge. Fourth slide, not obtaining sufficient knowledge. Too many manager and staff are desk-bound. The desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world, and understanding inherent risk involves knowledge of programs, functions, and activities. And I think, to me, when I heard that, and of course, these are all things that were speaking to my heart, but I'm thinking so oftentimes we get surrounded by one viewpoint and we aren't going out into the community to actually hear how these things may be adversely affecting our citizens. Number 5, independence of mind, the state of mind that permits the performance of an attest service without being affected by influences that compromise professional judgment, thereby allowing an individual to act with integrity and exercise objectivity and professional skepticism. And then independence in appearance, the avoidance of circumstances that would cause a reasonable and informed third party having knowledge of all relative information, including safeguards applied, to reasonably conclude that the integrity, objectivity, or professional skepticism of a firm or a member of the test engagement team has been compromised. And lastly, number 6, the summary, and I thought this was very good. Bringing accountability to an organization is hard and thankless work. Much of what we are asked to do requires us to challenge others and to not accept at face value what we are told or the evidence we review. We need to step up to the plate and accept that some parts of our work are subjective and depend on our professional judgment. And Marty Jackley was the presenter before this auditor got up at this conference, and he said transparency is the best solution to fraud, which I thought was wonderful. So tying this together to what this talks to me as a council member is that, first of all, I think we need to have an audit, a rotational audit of a different firm for our city every 3 to 5 years. This came up a few months ago. We were talking about who's auditing our city. I think having a rotational new set of eyes is a very good thing for our city. And also, I do believe that we need to start doing a performance audit in every department, starting with our enterprise funds, to ensure that everything is being done as it should be. And it doesn't mean that it's not being done that way, but this is just another set of checks and balances for our citizens. So I was just deeply appreciative that the Municipal League brought this presentation to our community.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments for open discussion? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is presentation from our licensing and permit techs. Let's get acquainted. And Butch Warrington, Chief Building Service Official, will make this presentation. And this is, Butch, as I understand, it's similar to one that we had about a month or so ago.
Yes, you are correct. Butch Warrington, Chief Building Services Official. Today I'm going to introduce you to our permit techs, our building services permit techs. They're the front line that we have. They're the ones who greet the people when they come in. They answer the phones when the people call. They give them all kinds of questions answered for them. They come back to grab the certain person that needs, if there's a question they can't answer. They're the ones that everybody sees right up off the top of the head. They issue a bunch of permits all day long. They put in the inspection requests. They're a busy group of people, let's put it that way. Today we have Lori Picard. She's been with us for 18 years. Her main duty is being on the phone. She answers a phone call a little less than every 4 minutes, all day long. So she's a busy girl. Tanya Hovalt, she's in charge of our licensing. We have over 3,100 licenses that she handles. Now this is what their main group is, but they all fill in for everybody. So we do have checks and balances there. Becky Lindekugel, she's been with us for 5 years. She has been very instrumental in setting up our CSS, our customer self-service, where contractors online can request for inspections. Corey Fickbaum, he is my stat guy. If you ever see my stats, his hands and fingerprints are all over it. He also issues the majority of our permits up at the counter. With his construction knowledge, he has really taken a load off of the plans examiners because he's able to issue the window permits, the small decks, the small additions without having to come back. Of course, if he has problems, he comes down and gets us, but a question is a lot easier than having us to come up to the counter at all times. So we're trying to be more efficient with the people that we do have. There's a couple here that aren't here. Is Chet Bora. He just got promoted to being a building inspector. He was Corey's right-hand man because between the two of them, those are the two that issued the majority of the permits for the small things. We also have one permit tech, or temporary, Stacy Haugen, who's back at the office manning that. What they do, they spend a lot of time at the front counter. I'm going to tell you that, and on the phones. That's the biggest thing. So far this year, we have issued roughly 5,700 permits. And the way it looks, we're not going to slow down the rest of the year either. The plans examiners will get a lot of these permits ready, especially the commercial permits. So they get them in a pending state. At that point in time, the permit techs can take care of them. They'll take the money, they will issue those permits. So they're very familiar with those contractors, probably more familiar than I am anymore. We take approximately 60,000 inspection requests a year. So these guys are busy putting this into the computer, and what it's done is they put it in the computer so the next day the inspectors know exactly where they're going to go. In addition, they take about 62,000 phone calls a year. It's a bunch, but we do it. We have implemented the CSS, which is the customer self-service. We thought our phone numbers would go down. They haven't yet. We're hoping it will. But right now we're up to about 500 inspection requests a month. And we're going to be implementing where they can actually apply for online here real shortly. Tanya handles the licensing. And that's a big chore because there's about 3,100 licenses out there. Real shortly, we're going to be sending out renewal notices for plumbing, mechanical, and sign permits. And that's going to put her, she's going to have a not problem keeping busy, let's put it that way. Every 2 years, those come due. For building contractors, it's every 3 years, and right now we're just shy of 900 residential building contractors that we have to keep track. She is also, all four of them are all very instrumental in the giving exams. We do about 230, 240 exams a year. And that includes just about every trade, and that includes residential building, the plumbers, the electricians, and the mechanical and sign permits. So this is just a glimpse of what these people do. With that, I thank you, and if you have any questions, please.
Butch, thank you very much. Any questions of Butch or of his team? Councilor Staley.
Butch, I was contacted by a lady who had had some roofing issues done with a contractor, and I was wondering, just for the public's information, when somebody hires a contractor to do their roof, do you physically come out and inspect that?
We will do a final inspection typically on a roof, but we don't do any, typically on a roof, we don't do any inspections before that final inspection.
Okay, so what if the inspection isn't up to par?
It's up to...
Are you signing off on inspections then?
We will at the end. We don't until we have done that final inspection.
Okay, so if someone has a problem with the quality of the work and you've signed off, then what happens?
If we have signed off and there are code violations, then we can access their bond, but we have to verify first that there's actual code violations.
Okay, so the city will stand behind a citizen. If you got a licensed contractor, you're kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval?
We like to think of that. But first there has to be a code violation. In some instances, there's things that we can't do. We can't judge workmanship unless there's a code violation. And there's good contractors, there's poor contractors. You know, I know we've got some that have come to us and said, but he put the wrong color shingle on my, I'm sorry, but that's not a code violation. There's nothing I can do about that. That's between a civil matter between the contractor and the homeowner at that point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, Butch, thank you very much. We appreciate this opportunity to get to know you better as well as your staff. And so I'd like to thank Lori, Tanya, Becky, and Corey for the work that you do. I mean, 60,000 requests for inspection and 62,000 phone calls every 4 minutes. You are the front line, so we do appreciate it. And Chet and Stacy are not here, but we thank you for your service as well, too. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. Okay, that concludes that item. Our next item is the events follow-up by Director Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works.
Good afternoon, Council. Thanks for having me today. I did want to do a follow-up from our meeting that we had earlier this month regarding the Event Center. There was one largely outstanding question that we wanted to be able to be responsive to. I do think, I thought it was a really productive discussion. There was a lot of questions asked and a lot of answers provided. I thought it was well stated by Council Christine Erickson at the end of the meeting to kind of net out what that key question was that really wanted to be answered, and I'll somewhat paraphrase, but it was, what assurance can you give the taxpayer that the siding is protecting the event center? And so over the course of last week, Council Chair Kiley and Council Vice Chair Erickson met with the mayor, and they discussed the question, and the outcome of that meeting was that we should use the RFP process, hire a third party to independently verify that the siding is adequately protecting the event center. And today I wanted to take you through that the scope of work, the schedule, and ultimately the selection process that we'll undertake to answer that question. All right, so the RFP process, I think you guys are certainly versed in it. There are processes that we use when you want to hire consulting firms. There's also processes that you use when you're going to actually do a hard bid on like a street project, right? So the RFP process is a process that you develop the scope of work, the schedule, and the criteria, and then you go to the market to ultimately have qualified firms solicit proposals to you, and then you go through a prescribed process to ultimately hire the most qualified firm. So let me take you through. I just have a couple of slides to take you through this process. So this is verbiage that's directly right out of the RFP, and the RFP would be released tomorrow, and then when we release it, we'll also email you a copy of it so you can also have a copy of the RFP. City of Sioux Falls will request proposals to establish a contract with a qualified firm for a building enclosure consulting services. That's what you coined this type of work with. The scope of work will be the city is seeking an independent review of the exterior metal wall panel system for functionality and structural soundness. We'll also ask the consultant to review the air and moisture barrier system behind the metal panel wall system. So that's the scope of work that we want them to prepare their proposal to address. The RFP schedule, and I'll just take you through this. The RFP would be issued tomorrow, and so that process is it runs through purchasing. Scott Russ will be our key contact. He or someone in purchasing normally is to preserve and protect that process. Be issued on October 18th, 2017. We'll ask for the proposals to be due by November 7, 2017. We'll have a review of the proposals and ultimately shortlist to what we would hope to be 2 or 3 of the strongest of the proposals between November 8th and 10th, 2017. Interviews, if they're needed, we've set aside the time of November 14th through the 16th. We would have an intent to award by November 17th, execute the contract right after a council meeting, which would be on November 22nd, and then ultimately have an aim to complete the work by December 31, 2017. have 2 slides here to take you through the RFP selection process. And again, all this is detailed in the RFP that you'll see tomorrow when it's ultimately released to the public. Upon receipt of the proposals, the evaluation team right now we're looking at would be a 5-person team. We would ask the council chair and vice chair to provide at least 2 people from the city council to be a part of the selection process of those 5. I would solicit a citizen representative to be on that panel that's had building experience. When we went through this with the original selection of the event center, we were able to cull people in town that were either managing facilities at Augustana, for example, somebody that has the role of managing multiple buildings and can add some good perspective to the process. And then ultimately there'd be 2 city representatives from the administration. The evaluation team will rely on qualitative information contained and presented in the proposals and reference checks. We always not only look at their approach, that they are going to approach the work, but we always follow up with prior work to make sure that they are truly qualified. Selection criteria that's listed in the RFP is an understanding, capability, and expertise to do building enclosure review work, expertise of the firm's proposed project team, reference and sample work evaluation, and cost. Second slide on the RFP selection process. When you go through that proposal review and scoring, and then the short list and interviews of the highest ranking firms. Again, if interviews are required, sometimes there is a clear leading firm, but we would always hope that there's at least 2 or 3 that really can merit, and so we can not only do a little more evaluation on their proposal and approach, but also meet the team. Contract negotiations, and then if an agreement can't be reached, and this is standard language that's in all RFPs, if an agreement can't be reached with the highest ranked firm, the city may move to the next highest ranked firm. City of Sioux Falls reserves the right to not select a firm as a part of this process if an agreement can't be reached for any other reason. So that's just a short presentation. I wanted to take you through our approach to answer the question, ultimately what the scope of work would be, the anticipated schedule, and then ultimately give you some context on how that selection process would work. And I am here to answer questions if you have some.
Thank you, Director Cotter. Questions for the Director? Councilor Neitzer.
Thank you. Just a couple questions and then one comment. I assume that the scope of this work would include all sides of the building in whatever form they deemed necessary?
It certainly can on the north, south, and the west. One of the things that we are looking at is just the flush wall panel, the CF12, so the corrugated on the top and the upper. We did not include that work in the scope.
And as I recall, I think on the east it's all the corrugated, I think. Is that why?
That's fair. That's right.
For them, essentially. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then just curious, how would we fund this? Would this come out of the second day fund?
It will be second day fund.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then the only comment I would make is, and you addressed this, I think, quite well, is perception is really important in this. So to make sure that it's seen as independent, and so it's really important. I think it's really good that there'll be a few counselors and a private citizen so that it has the legitimacy it needs, let's put it that way, so everybody can be very confident in the result. And as you stated, and as Councilor Erickson had stated, really, all of the rest is noise. It's really about just making sure that the largest expenditure in city history is protected. I mean, we're responsible to make sure and to be able to give that assurance to citizens, and frankly, to put this to bed so we can move on. And the only other thing I guess I would say is I want to make sure that when we get to the contract part, that it's very clear that any report will be public and it would be released promptly. So.
Absolutely. It'll certainly be taken through finish, and it'll be a public document.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of dovetail on that. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but talk specifically, Director Cotter, about how an RFP process works in terms of that transparency of who these people are that might end up being the ones that we have a contract with. Are they going to be people that are friends of yours or friends of mine? Are they going to be people that are here in Sioux Falls? What's kind of our goal for looking for the organization that will do this study for us?
Well, I'm not aware of anybody local that does this work. It is very specific work. You'll notice in the documents that we provided in the binder, Sink Homes, who is our architect, lead architect, we asked them to reach out to WJE, Weiss Jennings. They're a leading enclosure consulting firm to essentially review their design and their details. And so I would not expect WJE to be a proposer because they were involved with the original design. But there will be firms, I suspect, very similar to them where it's a specialty type service that we'll put out there on the web. And ultimately those firms are, they're looking for that type of work and then they'll respond. And so, and then you'll notice when you read the RFP that we didn't direct any methodology. We simply, if we go back to that scope of work, we clearly have asked them, we're seeking an independent review. And so then they'll write up their approach on how they're going to do that, okay?
So if you read the news at all, you know that we're not the only community on the planet that's having some sort of issue with their event center or some other large building, right? So will we maybe seek out folks, or we're just going to let it go to the wind and say, hopefully they'll catch us? Or will we say, we know XYZ community used thus and such organization. Will we send that, just say, hey guys, we've got this out here, would you be interested? Will we do that kind of thing too, looking for the best of those independent folks?
We certainly will. So that's one of the things that finance will do for us as well. We'll also reach out to our owner's rep and ask Dick on who are some of those firms that we should make sure get a copy of the RFP, and then they can choose if they're going to respond to it or not. But finance does do a nice job just doing some culling of that market of who does this type of work, really probably from Chicago to Denver in this area that could ultimately meet the scope of work.
Good, thank you. If I might, just one comment, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chair.
Councilor.
I just wanted to thank leadership. I mean, this is one of the meeting that started this conversation was one of the most difficult meetings I've been in for City Council in 7.5 years. It was difficult to watch. It was difficult to be a citizen and standing outside of it. I've heard more comments about that meeting than probably anything else. For us to come together as a city council and a city administration, to me, that's the headline here. It doesn't matter, as Councilor Neitzer said, it's not, all the rest of that conversation is really just noise. We really do need to just ensure that this building is to the quality that we expect it to be. And for us to come together and for the two of you to lead this process is commendable, and that is the headline, and I appreciate it.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. I won't speak too much just to hear myself talk on this because I think you've hit a lot of the points, both of you, already. But I mean, it is great news and the right thing to do. I mean, people are looking for answers and closure, and hopefully that's going to get us towards this goal. So by the schedule we're looking at, it's going to be, the study should be done by the end of the year, so we should have some news back and reported here in within a week or two of that, I'm assuming?
That would be our intention. And if there's any opportunity to provide an update in between now and the end of the year, I'll certainly do that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, nice work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I did, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Councilor Starr.
Thank you. I heard the first, the makeup of the selection committee. I heard the first two were councilors and then a citizen, and then the remaining members were?
City staff.
Okay.
And so I'll be one of the city staff members that is on the selection committee, and I should be able to finalize the second person here within the next. Certainly, we would ask this council leadership to provide who those two individuals would be maybe a day or two before the proposals are due so we can start to organize schedules. And so I'll do the same. I'll be working to solicit that citizen input as well as my internal team.
Just as a follow-up, then the other thing that kind of stood out to me, so the RFP is ready. why are we waiting until it becomes public before we get to see it and make sure that things are included other than the highlights here?
Well, so I asked that question today because I was planning to bring you a copy, and I think that's another strength of having finance lead the process. And so to protect the process, essentially, if another firm were to actually get it today, that would be potentially a day sooner than another firm, and they would have some advantage on an additional day to prepare. And so one of the areas that they're always concerned about is to avoid any protests in a very open process. And so that was the reason. I actually had copies printed for you, and I was told that to protect the process, this is how we always do it. And so we've essentially, everything else that's in the RFP is very much boilerplate if you've seen those RFPs. But we wanted today to actually take you through the scope of work, the schedule, and the selection criteria.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Staley.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say that I don't think that everything else surrounding this issue is noise. I think there were many things that were problematic that were brought up. But I am grateful that we're going to be moving forward to get an independent evaluation of what's happening. Are we going to be actually removing, they're going to be taking the siding off on different areas and looking behind it? Is this going to be what we would call an invasive type of a study, or is it just going to be looking at from the outside?
So when we ask for an independent review from a qualified firm, that methodology will be up to them. So again, we didn't want to dictate any of the terms of how they do that, and so we'll review their approach when they submit them.
Well, and okay, then you're also leading into this RFP thing that I'm really having a problem with, and I think citizens are as well. That we're going to, I would like to say at the end of the day that I'd like us all to be together, and it can be an executive session, and you can do a blind whiteout of the names of the companies, but I think we all need to be able to see what's being offered, so that when you bring us the final selection, we can say to the public, yes, this is the best. We've looked at the others, this is the best. Because just bringing us one selection and saying this is what some anonymous committee has chosen to me, isn't enough information for me to make a yes or no vote on something. And I'm assuming this will come to the council, correct?
It certainly will. That's part of the schedule, which is, it'll be on your consent agenda. I believe it's the 21st.
To vote for that company that you've chosen.
That's correct.
So I think this is so serious enough from our, and we can try to minimize it here on the council, but I think that the perception of the public is that this is concerning, and that we want to be able to have a lot of input and to have the ability to look at things for ourselves on this too. So we can say to the public, yes, this is what we found out. We did the most intensive study possible, and we know that this is as it should be moving forward.
I think, Councilor, I think the foundation of that is will be prevalent because you'll have two people on the selection committee, and I'll certainly leave it up to legal and those representatives to be able to share what they are able to. But to protect the RFP process, there are, the standard process guided through state law is that you go through a qualification-based selection, and then once you get through contract negotiations, then the list of everyone that proposed can be made public, and ultimately, once there's a secured contract, the selected consultant, that proposal could be made public. The others, there's proprietary information. Sometimes that is offered
I'm saying,
by...
block out then white it out. But my understanding from talking with people is that there is an opportunity for the rest of us to see the pros and cons of these proposals. And you can make them as generic and hide the proprietary information if you want. But I think we need to start being able to see more of this before we vote on these things.
I would have to defer to legal for that. Okay.
Councilor Rolfing.
I'm really sorry for Councilor Staley's distrust in a system that's worked so well for us for so many years, has been set down by state statute, state law, and it needs to be completely followed so that we don't end up with a lawsuit somewhere down the line saying we didn't do something according to the law. It's not part of our job to do to pass on every contract that is done by the city, although we do. Anything over $25,000, we do. And I'm sorry that there's so little trust from some of us that even though two of our own are on the committee, that we might not have a good selection, because a lot of us have done these and it's come out very, very well. So I would urge people to look at this a little bit more friendly and say, as Councilor Urbanbach and Selberg have, that this is a thank you very much to these two and to the administration for putting this together so that once and for all we can put this to bed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Selberg.
Thank you. I would just add, having gone through my first RFP experience here, I was impressed with the process. It's a very diversified group. We do have members from the council. We had 2 citizens on the one I was on who, without divulging too much information, were rock stars. They brought questions and background on the subject, and these were the people that I was most impressed with. So you had people from a wide variety of groups coming in, adding their expertise and their judgment. And I think that the confidentiality that's held for those people up until the choice is made is kind of key, or else you'd have them being lobbied by Lord knows how many people, because I could just see their name and contact information being spread out through every which whatever, getting 300 phone calls, and they're trying to make some decisions on already countless hours and facts that they're looking at and going through. And I would just, my experience, and this is just my experience, I would say there's a reason why they're doing it this way. I was impressed with it. I'll leave it at that.
Any other questions? Councilor Erickson.
I'll be brief. I just want to say thank you. This is something that continued to come out of our last meeting on October 3rd. I think every single one of us, if you look back, made the comment, what assurance can you give us? What assurance can you give us? Let's bring somebody in from the outside. There was another, let's do a separate independent audit of the project to determine everything was done, and let's look at the handling to make sure that this is done right. And so that was over and over and over. We came at you at that. And so as, I was the acting chair that time, I was the last person to speak, and so I got to summarize what I kept hearing over and over, and that was, what assurance can you give us? What can you do for the public? And so for the citizens that I represent, it has come up, and they have, this isn't even necessarily about the settlement, it is commingled and related, but this is our opportunity to be able to look to see, is there something wrong with it, or is it simply cosmetic? And that's what we were told, and so it's not that I don't trust your ability to look at it, but we did want that outside agency to look at this and to take a look at making sure that this is structurally sound and the weather barrier is doing what it's supposed to do. You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to come forward and do this, and so we thank you for partnering with us. We thank you for bringing this forward, and I look forward to the results. I really don't want there to be anything wrong with it, but if there is, we will find out, and then we can address that at the time and move on. So thank you for being here, and thanks again for working with all of us and really hearing us loud and clear.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting us present today.
Any other questions or comments for Director Cotter? I would just like to say, first of all, thank you very much for your comments that were directed towards leadership, but I just want to say this wasn't necessarily just a leadership issue. This was directed by the council as a whole, each and every one of us, because while I was gone during the follow-up meeting, I did view meetings from afar. I read minutes. I followed up with phone calls, emails, and the one thing that continued to be kind of a common thread was, how do we put this issue to rest once and for all? And that was, we need to have an independent review of the paneling to ensure that it's performing its function that it was designed for. So I thank the mayor for, first of all, taking my call once I returned, and for meeting early last week after a holiday, and then doing follow-up meetings and bringing us to this point, because I think we are going to have the most success when we're all working together with a common goal in mind. And so that common goal is to get the information that people are asking for, and that is assurance that the siding on our event center is performing its function. So thank you very much for your presentation today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of just things to take care of before adjournment. There's land use committee meeting. We'll meet. We'll make it 5 o'clock, or maybe just a few minutes after 5, so that we can give Tony a full 10 minutes to prepare. And then a reminder that we will not have a meeting the next 2 weeks. We do not have anything on the agenda for the county next week. So we have a rare 4th Tuesday off. And because this is a month with 5 Tuesdays, we will not be meeting the last Tuesday of the month. So our next meeting is not until November 7th. So having said that, this meeting is adjourned.